When the going gets tough, the tough get going. This is a common saying that portrays how challenging times that seem to paralyze those who are bereft of ideas ironically become the very thrusters that propel the thinkers to provide solutions. This is the story of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, an intervention agency of the federal government of Nigeria, which was created at a time when there was little hope that tertiary education in the country would ever be rescued. But TETFund has since changed the narrative and breathed new life into Nigerian universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. So much so that the chief executives of these institutions are today walking with an extra bounce in their steps. The vice-chancellors and rectors are all united in their commendations for TETFund.
When you call TETFund in terms of tertiary institutions in Nigeria, TETFund becomes a father and a mother to all tertiary institutions in Nigeria, especially in the area of infrastructure, training and retraining, staff development, human capacity building, and many more.
Oh my God, you can't even, you want me to keep talking then? I mean, TETFund is just the saver, I must tell you, of our university system, in particular University of Abuja. The challenges, I always see them as opportunities. We need to develop a university environment that is conducive to learning.
We have two DEX officers for TETFund. We have for project, we have for training. The project is also here. After the interview, we conduct you around to see all this, everything, including where I'm sitting now, the table that I'm sitting, they are TETFund. The AC, TETFund, everything TETFund. So we're happy with TETFund.
In this institution, TETFund has actually intervened dramatically. One, in the area of infrastructural development. As I speak with you, TETFund has actually supported us in virtually almost all the faculties of the university. We have either lecture theater or block of offices or classrooms or laboratories that they have constructed. If you go to our Faculty of Agriculture in Lafia, currently we are building block of classrooms with TETFund funding.
We owe our existence in Abuja to the TETFund. Unknown to many, most of our buildings were under the special intervention of the TETFund. And without TETFund, we probably would still be groping, not knowing, not having enough structures to be able to take in our staff and our operations.
I benefited from TETFund intervention in the area of conference attendance and research grants. With my team, I've gotten research grant of over 200 million naira from TETFund, not myself alone being the principal officer. With my team, we have about 3 that we are running currently.
But what is the secret to TETFund's successful track record? First and foremost, the seeds lay in the law establishing the intervention agency, which protects the fund from unnecessary red tape that often hampers operations. The executive secretary of TETFund, Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro, explains.
You're virtually pulling on the question of the emergence of TETFund, which was originally ETF, Education Trust Fund. Yes, the major issue that came up at that time, between 1990 and 1992, when ASU negotiated with the military government of that time, was the issue of inadequate funding, and desperately too. It was obvious that the appropriation window, which is the traditional funding window for public institutions, and particularly in this case, the tertiary subsector, was inadequate. And it was realized that there was need. And in in concert with government, as we negotiated and got government to agree that a non-appropriation funding window be created. Because I still remember that time, ASU had said, hey, we have a number of multinationals. They're taking all our money, especially from the oil companies, etc., even the banks and a number of big-time companies, that they're taking so much from the country. And we don't seem to realize that we have the right to ask that a certain proportion of the huge profits they are turning out should be committed to education tax. And why not? For the purpose of assisting as an intervention funding window, the traditional funding through the appropriation. And obviously, it was an innovative one, very creative thinking that has paid the nation well. Today, you know it. You go out there, and people are saying, but for TETFund, but for TETFund. It is very obvious that if it was not the idea of non-budgetary funding window through 2% education tax, that is what the law and the Act of TETFund stipulates, is helping to intervene. Only God knows what would have been the situation. But today we thank God that because the law was crafted to protect the trust fund, the money made available from collection of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, to TETFund. If it was not so, you can imagine what would have been the situation. It's generally said that as you move across our public tertiary institutions, that is the federal or state universities, polytechnics, or colleges of education, you will see the signature of TETFund all over. You don't have to be told. And well, we are happy to do so. And I will tell you what, the law was crafted to protect the funds. There are aspects that I will not speak about. The law was deliberately crafted to protect the funds. And that is why even the procurement process, engagement of invitation, advertisement for jobs that is published by the beneficiary institutions indicating the funds are from TETFund. The subsequent procedures are pretty strict. That is one area that was crafted to protect the funds. And no wonder, it seems to have worked. But more importantly, today, TETFund, we are not only being referenced as a model intervention agency in Nigeria, but that we are considered a model for already a number of African countries have taken after a model. And it's working for them.
Professor Bogoro is the one who first offered the idea that TETFund must invest in research and development if Nigeria is to show seriousness about improving the content component of its tertiary education institutions, amongst other potentials. While the nation's economic competitiveness is one of the major reasons for this strategy, it does have other additional benefits. The brain drain Nigeria has experienced over the past 30 years can be finally reversed. Brain drain from Nigeria is the exodus of middle-class and highly skilled Nigerians, which has been occurring in waves since the late 1980s to 1990s. This trend was initially restricted to certain professions, but has now become free-for-all, with the introduction of visa programs in order to fill workforce gaps in developed nations. This was sparked by an economic downturn following a period of economic boom in the 1970s and 1980s, propelled by the discovery of oil wells in Nigeria. According to Mo Ibrahim Foundation, it costs an African country between $21,000 and $51,000 to train a single medical doctor. Nigeria is one of such countries which have lost more than $2 billion since 2010 to training doctors who later migrate to countries such as the United Kingdom, because 10% of doctors working in the UK come from African nations. saving the UK about $2.7 billion by recruiting these doctors. Today, an increasing number of parents prefer to send their children to tertiary schools abroad as opposed to within their own country. The TETFund boss shares his views on such a situation and how we can fix it.
There are two sides to it. One, it is very sad that many of the individuals were those that were privileged to have been trained free of charge almost completely. People of our era. And I'll tell you, yes, some with legitimate funds is possible to send one or two. It should be a matter of option rather than inescapable reality. And that is the sad aspect. What is the motivation? First, it's not just that they just want to throw money. The truth is the poor standard and rating as well as ranking of our tertiary institutions has not helped matters. For instance, it is because we have identified some of the embarrassing realities. These are some of the things that have contributed to poor standard. And then look at the attitude. There are so many, it's a cluster of factors that have made Nigerians and parents lose hope. But it's not right. It's definitely not right. Because let me say one thing, to the credit of the Nigerian educational system, some of us have done it. You graduated from Nigerian institution, it could be 2-2, 2-1. Go to even the Ivy League universities out there. Some of the very best, anyway, universities out there in the other parts of the world. And you find out that if you were scoring average of B grades, you find that with concentration, you are scoring average of A grades. And that tells you that the larger environment is a factor. So, but it is the leadership that, of course, we have to accept that we are the ones to help improve the environment. And that's why, for instance, we are encouraging the provision of hostels and supporting it, of course, with funds. Now, we were clapping for physical infrastructure by way of classrooms that were virtually not there, offices. Some 15, 20 years ago, hardly was anybody talking about professorial offices. But today, TETFund has made that a policy, virtually all across our beneficiary institutions. When we build offices, we make sure there are professorial offices. Which university is it? I think University of Benin. Yes, I was there just yesterday. And the Vice Chancellor said, we have professorial exclusive, a block, exclusive professorial. You know, it's just like go to the military. They don't joke with the generals. If you are a general, you are respected exceptionally. And the professor is a general in the academic environment. And we just have to respect them. Your child would wish to be a professor, and you will celebrate, am I right? So that is what it ought to be. These are some of the things that we ought to have gotten right that we have not. But we can make the difference. And I can tell you, quote me on this. My intention is to play my role in TETFund to so change the rating and ranking as well as respectability of our universities, our polytechnics, our colleges of education, to the extent that we'll have a reverse brain drain, attracting scholars across. When we were undergraduates in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, we had a number of African countries coming. Now it is the reverse. It is Nigerians that are going to those same African countries. We can reverse it, and we are strongly beginning to do that. We are equipping our laboratory rather than just saying we built a building called laboratory, but you go in that there are no equipment. We are saying no, we must equip our laboratories to the extent we just came from Egypt a few days ago. There are agri-research institutes. Go there and see cutting-edge laboratory equipment. Cutting edge, the most modern. They are there, and they are certified reference laboratory. If you have a reference laboratory in the science community, Those are laboratories that have been acknowledged by international platforms, certifying platforms. That's the kind of thing where if we do that, there will be no excuse for to allow capital flight from our parents or Nigerians.
When the word TETFund is uttered within the campus of a higher learning institution in Nigeria, something consistently happens. The faces of the people at the institutions light up with bright smiles. What is responsible for this attitude? No doubt, it is connected to the high success rate of TETFund intervention projects that have had high impact. The success rate is as a direct result of TETFund's transparency, as well as its monitoring and evaluation mechanism. The purpose of monitoring and evaluation is to track implementation and outputs systematically. It helps determine exactly when a program is on track and when changes may be needed. Monitoring and evaluation forms the basis for modification of interventions and assessing the quality of activities being conducted.
Whenever somebody is entrusted with public funds, you must be conscious of accountability. I am always conscious, because if I am ES of TETFund, millions qualify to occupy that office. But it is the discretion of Mr. President to pick persons using board capacity and many other factors, including knowledge of a particular person, to say, you go and do this. So I sit down and I'm reflecting, what are Nigeria's expectations? Does TETFund have failed projects or abandoned projects? There was a time I had made it clear that we had to be associated with abandoned projects. And we have hit hard on institutions that allow projects to last so long, and that some people are almost describing them as abandoned. I can confirm to you here that we have suspended intervention of TETFund in a number of beneficiary institutions as recent as even a few months ago. We've done that, and it's across the country. Institutions that have failed to comply with our guidelines of accountability, and specifically, for instance, where some institution, you find out the head of institution either in connivance with the financial officer or BASA, as you may call them, would apply funds meant for one project to another project. It's unacceptable, and if we send our monitors, we do forensic assessment and monitoring, and we have evidence that money meant for Project X was moved to that. That is corruption. It's not right. It's not appropriate. And it will slow down one other project. Of course, you want to use money to fund one project at the expense of another. That is not right. And the worst of it, that when you go into the books, you find glaringly those. And we are now of the Board of Trustees. It's very clear we have suspended some institutions for months, some for nearly 1 year. And they had to do it right and correct and reverse those things. So we are conscious. We cannot continue that way. But overall, let me say this, those cases are exceptions. Overall, at TETFund, we can proudly say that most of our intervention projects are doing well. We take time. There are times I would visit. I've done it many times in the past. I'll go to an institution. I refuse to tell the head of the institution I'm coming. In fact, I remember there was one that he was scrambling to rush from a 50-kilometer journey to, and by the time he arrived, they told him that the ears of TETFund had left 30 minutes ago. And but I liked it that way. What I do is, it wasn't as if, but I just do it that way, so that I did that in the past, and I will still do it. I've done it recently, and I will still do it. It keeps people on their toes.
TETFund is playing a role in improving the quality of education in Nigeria's public tertiary institutions, and thus it is a soldier in the fight against poor education. Professor Bogoro frowned at the shady practices of some students today who, in collusion with their parents and unscrupulous academic staff, receive certificates without being properly educated.
I would tell you what, we are all in it, and we're working together to save the embarrassing situation where it exists. Overall, generally Nigerians agree that there has been significant decline in standard and quality. And precisely while the issue of access has opened space with new universities, new polytechnic, new college of education, but the tendency of Nigerians overemphasizing certificate instead of knowledge. That is the negative driving force responsible for people. They clap for them, the parents come and celebrate, and by the time you engage them, let me just tell you this. I've seen application letters for employment by graduates that leaves you worrying if at all they benefited from the four walls of the ivory tower in the real sense. Ordinary application, that's just as an example. But we have a system that we have a country, it's more of a national problem. Believe me, where there is too much emphasis on certification rather than knowledge. We've seen people want to cut corners. We've heard of scandals, I don't know, I cannot name, but we've had it in whispers and gossips that some people have PhD theses written for them. Let me be honest with you. It's repugnant, unacceptable, and to be an insult for anybody as an academic, or you parade yourself with a title and you cannot defend it. When I say to defend it, if you are a professor, if you are a PhD holder, climb the stage and communicate as a professor, as a PhD holder, in the midst of your peers at any stage, whether it is Damaturu or it is Ugeli. I hope I'm talking sense. Or it is Cambridge, or it is Yale. You just close your eyes and imagine it could be any of those stages. Are you sure you stand and talk with confidence? Believe me that some things have happened in such a way that it's disturbing to we that are operating. We compare it with the standards of the past. There is no doubt. But the more worrisome aspect is attitudinal. Even parents do not help. Many parents don't help matters. Not all parents, but many parents. They would want to even go and influence grades for their wards and children. You better imagine that. So it's a bigger problem beyond the education sector, honestly speaking. It's a bigger problem beyond. These are some of the areas that the National Orientation Agency needs to come in. We need to talk to ourselves. This cannot continue. Because if you want to get a certificate, whether it's PhD or you want to become a professor, and if I jokingly say, you cannot prophesy. It's just a joke anyway. Now, it's just bad enough. That cannot continue. So whatever we need to do, precisely what we're saying, we are providing physical infrastructure, we're going to the content, getting more people with PhDs, both local and overseas. And making sure that, for instance, the TETFund, National Research Fund, I can tell you that that is the biggest research basket in Nigeria today. And we are so rated at the moment is because of the credibility of the TETFund NRF research grant that we got appointed to represent Nigeria on the Commonwealth Science Granting Council. And that is an apex organ. What that means is that TETFund will now be given funds to disburse on behalf of the Commonwealth Science Granting Council in Sub-Saharan Africa. In the case in Nigeria, will be the one to do that. It's because they have assessed the credibility. It's just like the academic staff training program of ours. It's so credible. We are moving far, getting closer to signing an MOU with Fulbright scholarship. We've sat with them. We are hoping we tidy up the interest. It's mutual between Fulbright and TETFund to sign a this thing for the purpose of some good discount for our scholars going out there. If we earn the respect of the international community, it's because we are doing some things right. And so we are happy. At the moment, we are holding the largest research grant in Nigeria. And we are happy to ensure that it's not just holding the money. The process of those that emerge with the research grant is credible and respectable.
TETFund is essentially building a successful education sector that delivers academic as well as industrial minds that meet or exceed the collective expectations of Nigerians. The agency strives to ensure that the end product of its interventions meet the quality requirements and standards defined. The focus on research and development takes these interventions beyond the limits of the classroom and into the sphere of the global knowledge economy, thus making the Nigerian academic a centerpiece for economic development. And that is the paradigm shift.